Welcome in, Big Blue Nation, to another episode of the Cats Talk podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Johnston, joined by my co-host, Tyler Britton, supposedly our football expert. We've got him in here on the football podcast. Tyler, it's the off season, and Will Stein is forming his first coaching staff, and a lot of the pieces are starting to come together. We're hearing transfer portal news. We're hearing additions. We're hearing guys declaring for the draft. We're breaking down all of it here, Tyler. But first off, feels like this is the first time I've been able to talk to you about the Will Stein hire just in general. What are your big overarching thoughts on the hire for Kentucky's next head coach?
Yeah, I'm really excited about Will Stein. And he's coming over from Oregon. The first thing I think of with Oregon, before I even do any kind of research on what they do or whatever, I just think of big plays. I think of explosive players. I think of development. It brings the fun back to football, which is what Kentucky football seems like it's been lacking over the last couple of years that I've been watching it. Seems like it's been very bland, very basic, especially on the offensive side. Will Stein kind of brings a new flavor to Kentucky, and I think that's exactly what Kentucky needs. I think it needs to modernize. I think of in the NFL sense, I think of the Chicago Bears kind of transitioning over to the Ben Johnson, style, where the Bears were known for defense for decades, and now they're kind of going into this new style of football, which is what football is now. And I think Will Stein kind of brings that to Kentucky. He kind of transforms it into an offensive play style. And I think that the fans will really enjoy this. I think it'll bring new flavor to the team. I think it will bring in new recruits. I think it'll bring in some new transfers. I'm really excited about Will Stein. Would have liked to have seen maybe Brian Hartline, but we'll take what we can get with Will Stein here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously those are the two candidates that we think it came down to the most. Obviously, I do need to throw at least a little bit of shade at Ohio State fans where I can. The Ohio State fans that were in my mentions and in my DMs saying that Brian Hartline would never come to Kentucky, this guy just accepted the job at USF. So I don't need to hear anything from Ohio State fans regarding that. But those were two, I thought, good head coaching candidates. And to be able to land one of them in Will Stein, especially in such a quick turnaround. I mean, I don't even know if it was a full 24 hours from Mark Stoops' firing to Will Stein's hiring. Granted, with it being official, there was probably a little bit of time in there. But I love what you mentioned there, just the change in play. Like, this is going to be night and day difference of what you've seen from a Mark Stoops-led team. And honestly, I think Big Blue Nation was just ready for a reset in general, let alone what you thought of Mark Stoops, what you thought of how he called plays and how he ran the defense. Whatever you thought of Stoops in general, I think everybody can agree it's nice to get this influx of youth into the football program and just new ideas, new decision makers. And Tyler, we're going to talk about, it's probably the next thing we're talking about here. A GM? Finally, Kentucky's hiring a GM and even an assistant GM. I mean, these are things that, first off, should have been done a couple years ago. But here we are. We've got some. Tyler, what are your thoughts on Pat Biondo? First off, kind of a crazy name. Like, I've never heard of a last name Biondo, but I personally think getting the director of recruiting from Oregon to be your GM, guy who's obviously worked with Will Stein over the past couple years, I'm all in for it. And more than anything, outside of even just the hire, I think just having a GM in place and a clear defined, hey, you have this role, you have this role, will help out Kentucky football. Because if you remember correctly, when Vince Marrow left, like, that was a lot of the reason he left. It's like, who's overseeing the roster? Is it Eddie Grant? Is it Vince Marrow? Are we doing high school recruiting? Are we going transfer portal? So to have all this coming from one voice and one overarching man, I think is going to help this staff and hopefully just help the trajectory of Kentucky football going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You look across college football right now, and the bigger programs are starting to transfer over to this model here where you have a GM overseeing the recruiting, overseeing NIL. And I think it's really important to separate a little bit from the coaching aspect to the recruiting and NIL part. Because you're talking about negotiating money and it's just different. But that's why you think of coaches like Nick Saban, why they exited the game, because you're transferring eras and you didn't connect the same way. Maybe a reason why Mark Stoops wasn't necessarily getting the same catch that he once was in his earlier days. Will Stein being there is definitely going to help. Getting some youthful coaches in there is going to definitely help. But I think bringing someone over that Will Stein really trusts and Pat, I think this will go a long way. And really, just look at the resume that Pat's bringing in here over the last 4 years with Oregon. I mean, he's in the top 15 each year. He's in the top 10 each year, or in the last 3 years, including this year. I think he was ranked second or third. That's incredible to have. And I'm just looking at their recruits over the last few years. You're looking the last 4 years, he had 9 5-star recruits and 56 4-star recruits over at Oregon. That's huge to bring over. And again, the chemistry that he's going to have with Will Stein, bringing that over for the offense and potentially the defense as well. Hopefully, they're not the exact numbers. I get it. You talk about Oregon, a little flash up there to Kentucky football, but I mean, if you can get something similar to there, that's bringing this program back to life. And I think that the players, I think once Will Stein has a year or two to actually showcase what they're going to be producing out there, I think this really helps Pat bring in key players both in the recruiting aspect and from the portal to benefit this program and make us kind of the new flashy face in the SEC.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the transfer portal there because you mentioned the recruiting classes and how good it is to get guys from high school and to be able to recruit and develop. But that was the old regime's, model, recruit and develop. And we've kind of seen it's hard to keep guys around in that. I mean, it's hard to keep anybody there for 3-4 years and actually fully let them develop. That's where the Stoops era was. It was great when you were able to do things like that. Bring in a guy like Josh Allen, who's not heavily regarded, and develop him into being the 6th overall pick and now the Jags' all-time leading sack leader. But a lot of this is done in the transfer portal. You mentioned Biondo, 4th recruiting class in 2025, 2026 class is 3rd. But also think of just from the quarterback position alone, who he's gotten in the transfer portal, guys that were technically cast-offs before they got to Oregon and kind of rejuvenized their career with Will Stein and obviously Dan Lanning. I mean, Bo Nix coming from Auburn, huge transfer portal hit. He ends up going in the 1st round. Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma, you end up getting him drafted. He was a part of the Heisman ceremony. And then Dante Moore, you get him from UCLA. Again, another cast-off, you get him, bring him over. He's looking like he's going to be a 1st-round pick if he does declare. I mean, it seems like they're hitting on both ends right now. Transfer portal additions and through the high school ranks. And that's something that you're going to need to be able to do is hit in both. And I think that's personally what's got me the most excited. And you've seen their ability to work together, Will Stein and Biondo, just from the quarterbacks. I mean, that's ridiculous, thinking of those 3 guys back to back to back, all coming in for one season and leaving. And those are the guys that you're all – I mean, Bo Nix at Auburn, Bo Nix was horrendous that last year at Auburn before he went over to Oregon. And then Dylan Gabriel was kind of just set aside at Oklahoma, goes to Oregon, and I still don't think Dylan's that good. I mean, you see him in Cleveland, he's already kind of lost his job to Shedeur Sanders, but in that offense, in that system, they're able to get the most out of him. And they've done the same thing with Dante Moore this year, and it's something that gets me really excited, their blend of both the transfer portal and recruiting through the high school ranks.
Yeah, I always look at college quarterbacks a little different from how they play in college to the NFL. Obviously, you'd love to see that when they do transition well, but I don't know, you could be an all-time great college quarterback like Tim Tebow and go to the NFL and be dog doo-doo. It's insane. So, I think that says a lot about Will Stein, what he brings in. We'll talk about the OC coming in as well, but like we said, that the chemistry that Pat's going to have, just being able to recruit for Will in the past, I think that's going to go, it's going to be light and day different from what we had in the past, where Mark Stoops was going out knocking door to door, trying to get people to come on. Credit to him for doing what he did back in the era that he came on, but this is a new era. We've talked about it. It's it's going to be interesting to see, how you get people in, how you convince people to sign these deals, or, can they sit a year and be ready to go, year 2 kind of thing. Is that still a thing, or is that dead now? So, it's exciting to see what Pat can do. Like I said, it's going to bring a new spark to this team. And I think Kentucky fans are really going to be excited. And look, it's no secret. You see what Oregon's been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, they've been competitive every single year. I mean, they if they didn't play Ohio State in the weird way the bracket was set up last year, they probably would have gone to at least the semifinals before getting knocked out, if not to the final or to the championship game itself. So it really should have been Ohio State versus Oregon last year in the championship game if it was set up correctly. But it's no secret that the success comes starting with the recruiting and the transfer portal and everything that they're able to do over there.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And you know, we've let's go ahead and talk about this before we even just start getting to these other guys. Like, what do you think about allowing Will Stein and Jay Bateman, because they're both on playoff teams, to continue coaching throughout the end of the playoffs? Because there's good things about it. You obviously get good publicity. You see it out there. You see the Oregon offense. Hopefully, they put up a good amount of points against James Madison, and you're like, oh, that's the guy that's going to be the head coach at Kentucky if you're just sitting home watching next year. And that's something that you kind of remember in the back of your head. And then same thing with Jay Bateman down at Texas A&M. Him to a little bit less of that same degree, just because obviously Will Stein's overseeing the whole thing. But what do you think about something like that? Obviously, this week doesn't necessarily matter as much. But once you start getting past, they win this week, and if they beat, Texas Tech the week after, you're starting to look at, man, he's missing time into the transfer portal. You start really getting into that window. This is why I think personally college football just kind of needs a whole reset in general of the college football calendars. There's so many things that I don't want to say put playoff teams at disadvantages, but put even teams like Kentucky and teams like USF, you mentioned Brian Hartline, who's going through something similar there. Like, where do you stand on this whole situation?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think that Kentucky's in a win now mode. I obviously bring in as many recruits as you can and win as many games as you can, but I don't think if we're realistically expecting to go to a deep playoff run next year, at least for right now where I'm sitting at, I'm not expecting it. So this is a retool year. If there's going to be, obviously it's broken, but every team's going through this. Who's going through a coaching transition right now? Who's picked up a top coach that's playing for one of these teams? So I get it, it happens, but I think with Will Stein specifically, I think you want to see him win a couple of games just so we can say, hey, like this really helps. Well, I think it'll help with recruiting and transferring because you'd be like, oh, wow, like we're going to go play for a coach that can make it deep into the playoff run. But I think more importantly for him, as long as if they do go out, they go out strong with a good offensive performance, I think he's fine. I think Kentucky's fine. To your point, like if they get a national championship game, it's probably worst case scenario for us, whether they're doing good or bad on offense, just because we're missing so much time with him. And then the portal's going to be up. There is some buffer period now from what I was reading into. I think like an extra 15 days or something like that for coaches who are in the playoffs. I don't know. But it's still a tough blow when all these other schools are going to be signing early and they're going to have full leverage to put into. I'm thinking like LSU right now. They're going to have Lane Kiffin going around and signing all these guys and talking to all these guys when the portal opens up. So that's a little bit of a blow. But for Texas A&M here, they could go all the way, and as long as they play solid defense, like I don't think it's hurting us too much at the end of the day. And I think that would be really cool to see, for Kentucky fans, to be like, hey, like Texas A&M's defense has been carrying them all year, and this is what they're doing. I think that would be a really cool statement for Kentucky bring in for the defense here. So I think to your point, I think Oregon, if they win, I think if they get to the quarterfinals, maybe the semifinals, that's where I would say is ideally the place that Will Stein needs to go before he needs to just tank a game and then get out.
Personally, I think best case scenario is they put up a lot of points against James Madison, win that game, and then next week against Texas Tech, put up a lot of points, but the defense just doesn't have their back and they just can't score enough to keep up with it. And then you get Will Stein back in Lexington, and he's there with about a week until the transfer portal opens. I think that's best case scenario for Kentucky fans, because once you start getting past that, you're talking about missing a lot of the transfer portal time. And with balancing duties, I mean, being the offensive coordinator and putting together a whole transfer portal roster after losing so many seniors like we're going to talk about a little bit later, that's a lot of hats to wear. Jay Bateman and Texas A&M, they can go as far as they want. They can win it all for all I care. That'll be a great story for us, and we'll feel great about getting them into Lexington. I don't want Will Stein winning past this weekend. Selfishly, like I said, I want him to put up 100 against Texas Tech, but I want Texas Tech to put up 101. That way we can get him back on campus, because we've got a lot of roster spots to fill, and we need boots on the ground. We need Will Stein here in Lexington, because I think the good that it gets, the public, the public reaction of having him out there and them saying, oh, this guy's heading to Kentucky, that's great. And I think that does a lot for you this week. But let's also remember, this time next year, nobody's going to remember that. Not a soul's going to remember that. So it's really only a 1 year bump. And you've already had signing day. You're not getting any other high school recruits. So you're really not helping much there. So really, you're doing all this for the transfer portal that's open from the 2nd to the 14th, if I believe is the last I looked up, is when those dates are. And you mentioned for the playoff teams, those guys, they get like 15 days, I think, after the playoff game to enter the transfer portal. And they have like their own little window to try and make everything a little bit fair. I personally think that's best case scenario.
Selfishly, a little bit on my end, I'm okay with Oregon losing in quarterfinals. It's fine with me because it helps Kentucky out, and Ohio State doesn't have to play them. And then selfishly, Texas A&M can lose next week against Ohio State. I'd be okay with that too. But if they end up getting past that, it helps Kentucky, so it helps the pod, and I'm happy with that too.
Yep. All right, Tom. Obviously, we mentioned the GM, got the assistant GM. We're bringing in all these Louisville Cardinals. Like, this will be the third guy on the staff from the University of Louisville. All I'm saying is they poached the big dog, and boy, did we go after him after that. They said, all right, you're going to take the big dog from us? All right, we're going to take Will Stein. We're going to take Pete Noka, who's going to be our assistant GM. And then we're going to, I can't even remember his name, Colby Smith. I mean, he played running back at Louisville in the early 2000s as well. Anybody you got that has any coaching prowess right now, the University of Kentucky's taken. I don't know if I like it necessarily. Too many, the red runs a little too deep. Tyler, you've driven in a car with me. Anytime I see somebody with U of L license plates, I'm going right by them, right beside them. Anytime, it's just right in their face, L's down, whenever I can do it. So I got to get Will Stein and all these guys to put an L's down before I can trust them. I think that's self-explanatory. Wouldn't you agree?
First of all, you in the car when I'm driving and you're doing it's kind of disgusting, to be honest. Because then I'm getting looked at like, oh, why are you letting your friend do this? I'm like, all right, hang on a second, leave me alone. It's him. Get him out of the car. But no, it's really cool. I think we weren't able to produce the last few years in Kentucky football against them. So the least we could do is just take some of these pieces away from them, especially after they take the big dog away from us. Who knows? Maybe this guy's now our new big dog, and he becomes, we were talking about it a little bit off air, so you get a little Batman and Robin action from the GM spots. You obviously have Pat going out and doing his thing, and what he did over at Oregon. A little Pete action here. Let's see what Pete can do. He can become the big dog over here, and bolster that up, and put an offense and defense together and make a playoff run. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But putting else down to that when the time comes.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I mean, the best thing I like about the Pete Noka hire, in all honesty, has nothing to do with Pete Noka. It's just the fact that we have an assistant GM. We didn't just say, okay, a GM, now everything's set, you're fine. No, we even gave like another additional staff member to help out because, Tyler, think about it. Each year you're scouting the entire country for high school kids. And then wait another 4 months and you're scouting the entire country for college kids again. It's a lot to put on one guy's shoulder. So having another guy where you can kind of delegate some of those responsibilities, I think is going to be huge. Because if we're being real, he didn't really do anything at the University of Louisville. I mean, Louisville is not known for their recruiting prowess. They do pretty solid in the transfer portal. I mean, they finished 68th in the country nationally in 2025, 47th this year. They're really not known for their recruiting chops, but I do like just having that extra guy in the building.
Yeah, I think Kentucky, and to your point, I think that really does help, especially in this region that Kentucky's in. If you think about like where we're positioned at as a university, you got Louisville down the street, which they're not in the same conferences. They're not even. Yes, they've beaten us the last couple of years. They're not in the same league as us. When you're talking about SEC, so SEC football, players want to play there or the Big Ten right now. You got Ohio State north and Michigan, 500 miles north of Kentucky. So you have those two schools north and you got Tennessee south, but you really have all that like Midwest region that's open, that's so close to the university. Ohio State's not getting all these players. Michigan's not getting all these players. So you still have a lot of players you can go after, even though those are, big brand schools. it's still a huge region that you can go get these big players. And I think that bringing in a second guy that can really go out there and get some recruits and get some transfers, I think that's going to go a long way. You're going to get a lot of kids who say, hey, I want to stay close to home. I want to be near mom and dad at 18, 19 years old, but still play football, 200-300 miles away, but somewhere close in that region. I think that really does help us as a university grow that football program. And again, I think this is the new adoption of the how big school football teams are being built. They're getting in these GMs and assistant GMs are becoming NFL programs just at a college level. And I think, I don't even think that all the schools with GMs have an assistant GM. I don't think all of them do. So this is a huge step for UK to really go from really nothing to not just something, but something with a backup as well.
Yeah, it was almost like there was no infrastructure, and they've just overnight they decided to, all right, let's go ahead and build this thing. We've decided not to do it for 4 or 5 years, and maybe a lot of that was a disservice to Mark Stoops. He was kind of dealt a bad hand. Then again, he just got $37 million to go walk around Lexington. So, I mean, I can't feel too bad for him. But Tyler, let's go ahead and talk about some of these offensive and defensive coordinators and all of the auxiliary coaches that have been hired. Let's go ahead and start with Joe Sloan, because this is one that I have seen people who are insanely high on this hire, and I have seen people who are extremely upset and pissed off about this hire. And I'm going to be honest, I understand both sides of this. Like, I think the guy has great recruiting chops. I think he is one of the better recruiters in the country, and he has a resume to back it up. But the last year that he spent with Brian Kelly at LSU was left a lot to be desired. Where do you fall? Because obviously we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but where do you fall on ranking this higher?
Yeah, you look at the last year and you're like, okay, I can see where fans are kind of twisted up. Also, I also look at just his pedigree in general. He has about the same tenure length of coaching as Will Stein. In terms of, I think he started off as a GA in 2010 or something like that. So, I mean, about 15 years of coaching in general. He has some experience. He's not like, 30 years of experience, but he has some experience, which is fine. That's like, for an OC in college football, I'm fine with it. His last year with LSU, not the greatest, but I'm not sure that that's not more Brian Kelly than Joe Sloan. I think there's a lot of, from what I to be honest, I haven't done too much digging on this, but from what I know of the Brian Kelly situation is a lot of players just didn't like him. So, when you have a coach that players don't like, they don't play for him. And when you don't play for your coach, everyone looks bad. I kind of look at my, the first couple of years I was with the Washington Commanders and just watching the team suffer there, but no one really wanted to be there. And you could tell. But then, new coach comes in, they play lights out with absolutely no talent. So, I look at this team the same way. I think that Coach Sloan, him and Will Stein, it looks like they have a very similar offensive mindset. They're going to be trying to have, they're going to try to have a balanced attack. They're going to see more passing out there, a lot of RPOs, a little bit more spread option style, which we'll see how that plays out in the SEC. But, I have confidence that if they get the right pieces in place, this can be a very effective offense. I'm just happy you have an offensive coordinator that actually complements your head coach, and because I do believe that Will Stein's going to try to bring in his offensive system. He's going to expect it to be ran the way he wants it. So to have Joe Sloan come in, and it sounds like they have really good rapport. From what I was looking into, this was a conversation as Will Stein was in the midst of getting hired that he was already reaching out to Joe about this position, this opportunity for him. So it sounds like they have a good connection. This was a first call conversation. I think this is a good hire for the team, and I think this is the start of a new offensive era at Kentucky football. Bringing in and making sure we still run the ball, but also having options where you're going to see a lot of motions. You're going to see a lot of jet sweeps. You're going to see a lot of movement and creativity, which we didn't see under Bush Hampton the last couple of years. And I think fans should be really excited for this.
Yeah, and the big thing that I think I take away from this, and just him and Will Stein together, Joe Sloan's first year was a quarterback's coach at LSU. He had a transfer that was, there's still videos out there of the Arizona State quarterback, Jaden Daniels, teammates laughing at him as he put his name into the transfer portal and throwing his stuff in the locker, like throwing it into the garbage can. He took that guy who wasn't one of the Arizona State and made him into a Heisman Trophy winner. Obviously, Jaden Daniels has a ton of talent and is a superb athlete. But I think you do have to credit Joe Sloan with a little bit of that development in his first year there. And then obviously after that year, he gets promoted to the offensive coordinator. And then Garrett Nussmeier had an incredible year last year. What happened this year? I don't know. But the thing is like you look at it and you're thinking about quarterback development. He developed Jaden. For whatever reason, I forgot his name for like 5 seconds there. He developed Jaden Daniels. He developed Garrett Nussmeier. And then think about what Will Stein did over at Oregon. We mentioned it. Develop Bo Nix, develop Dante Moore, develop Dylan Gabriel. You know I'm not the biggest Cutter Boley fan, but if you're Cutter Boley, where in the world would you want to be right now than with those two guys that have gotten guys to the NFL and have gotten guys just light years from where they were when they showed up on campus to either Oregon or LSU. And in that first season where Sloan was the offense coordinator, I mean, things were great. Second in the SEC in total offense, seventh nationally in a passing offense, 315 yards per game. I mean, everything was so great. I genuinely don't know what happened to LSU this year. I mean, if you remember our over-under picks for the SEC, Tyler, I don't think there was a guy that was higher on LSU going into the year than me. And the only thing I prefaced it saying afterwards was, but Brian Kelly is still the head coach, and I don't like Brian Kelly. So that's kind of where we are now. And I see why fans are a little hesitant in this hire because he got fired midseason. Anytime you see a guy fired midseason, you kind of have that. If he got fired at LSU and the whole staff got let go midseason, why do we want him? But I think if you look back into what Joe Sloan's done over the past couple of years, you'll look at it and say that I think this is a good hire.
Not that this is directly related, but I think it's similar enough where it's worth noting. People didn't like Josh McDaniels when he got fired from the Denver Broncos, when he got fired from the Las Vegas Raiders. But when he goes back to New England every single time, he's a great coordinator and people love him. Again, we kind of talk about Brian Kelly and the way he went out, and really no one had faith in Brian Kelly, and I think that was more so the problem in LSU. I don't think that talent, from a coaching staff perspective or the players' perspective, I don't think those were necessarily the problem. I just think people didn't buy into Brian Kelly and his philosophies and how he did things there and how he did business as a football coach there. So I'm more excited about this. And to your point, if you're Cutter, I think you just went from, hey, how do I make an NIL deal for the next couple of years and then retire, to, wow, I might actually have a chance to go play at the next level now. And so I think he's going to really try to buy into Joe Sloan and Will Stein here for the next couple of years. And I tell you what, he better step up and play well this year, because I think right now he's projected to be the starter. We'll see what happens in the transfer portal. But he should be looking his chops right now because he has the talent to start and do well. I think in the Will Stein, Joe Sloan offense, if he can stay healthy and he has a big arm, he can throw the ball, with the best of them. I think if this is if Joe Sloan can develop him anything like, Jaden Daniels, we might have something in Kentucky. This might be something special.
Tyler, the last 3,000-yard passer at the University of Kentucky was Mike Hartline, who's now on the staff and is over 30 years old. I mean, it's been that long since Kentucky's. And I'm not talking about a 4,000-yard passer. No, a 3,000-yard passer. So anything is an improvement. I will say there's been two things of the Will Stein era that I haven't liked. And now, granted, these things can change. First off, you have to get, and I mean have to get, Cutter Boley competition in the transfer portal. I, in no world, want this to be this is Cutter Boley's team, just let it run. I know Kentucky fans have the Kentucky connection like they do with Trent Noah, and I know, Tyler, you love Trent Noah. So comparing the two might do you a little disservice here, but I think you have to go out, and it doesn't have to be a splashy. You don't have to go out and get, DJ Lagway, Dylan Raiola. You don't have to go get those big names that are going to enter the portal. But you have to get somebody that can at least give Cutter Boley a push during this offseason. Make sure this isn't just handed to him. Because right now, with all the speculation that we've heard, it feels like this is going to be just handed to him.
Yeah, we'll see what's out there in the transfer portal when it comes around. I do agree that you try to go get a quarterback that can compete. And I think there's going to be plenty of quarterbacks who would be lined up to want to play in this style of offense that are coming from even just a smaller school, that they just want to upgrade up into something where they have a chance to go make the NFL or making some NIL money. So it'll be an interesting offseason. Again, this is probably where Oregon maybe winning this week, losing next week kind of benefits Kentucky, because if they win, if they make a good playoff push, you might not have good competition, and that might just be more of a Will Stein not being there to recruit. But then again, you do have, well, I guess not, because the GM's also coming from Oregon too. So, we'll see what happens there. But I do agree. I think you bring in an outside competitor to push Cutter Boley. I think that does help them. I don't know who's out there that's actually going to give him a true run for his money right now, but we'll look at see once that portal opens. We'll take a look to see who that might be, and we'll give an evaluation there.
Yeah, and Tyler, before we transition to the defense here, I kind of want to just one thing before we get to the defense. We're talking about Joe Sloan here and his recruiting chops there for a minute. This guy got hired. I mean, theoretically, he wasn't even hired yet, and flips LSU's 4-star receiver commit Kenny Darby to Kentucky on signing day. I mean, Will Stein had been the coach for 24 hours, something like that, and you get that insta flip. I mean, that's something. Granted, who knows how long Kenny Darby's going to be here? We never know, and what he's going to turn out to be. But something like that, I think, can get you a little fired up for what this staff, because I think a lot of these guys, what they're going to have in common, what we're going to keep talking about, is their recruiting prowess, and that's kind of what they're known for. And I think that's something that you need at the University of Kentucky, because with the cap, you can call it whatever you want, NIL budgeting, whatever you want. We have to play in the margins. We have to win those budget-friendly deals. Those are the ways in which we have to win. And hopefully with Sloan, that's a way we're going to win. Tyler, you want to know something that's a little weird, though? We mentioned how Sloan got fired after that Texas A&M game, that they didn't put up a good offensive showing. You want to know a little bit of why? Jay Bateman, Kentucky's new defensive coordinator, gets this guy fired. Do you think they're going to have a conversation about that before they start?
It's definitely possible. I think it'd be a funny conversation to have for sure. Maybe they were in on it. Maybe it was part of the script, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to get you out here early. Will Stein's going to come over. He's going to give you a call. I'm just going to help you out. We're just going to destroy your offense, and you're just going to lay an egg." Maybe that's what the conversation was. I don't know, but interesting conversation for sure. I'm sure they both will have a good laugh about it mid-season here, but. I can see some tension being there at the beginning. Be like, "Hey, man, you cost me my job. What the hell?"
Yeah. So I mean, let's go ahead and talk about Jay Bateman. I mean, this is a guy. A lot of these guys we're talking about are very young into their coaching careers. Just so young guys in general. Will Stein, obviously, Sloan's young. When we get to some of those position coaches, a lot of those guys are young. Jay Bateman's not one of those guys. He's already had a 25-year coaching career. Spent 5 years as a defensive coordinator at Army, 3 seasons at North Carolina as a defensive coordinator, and then obviously he spent his last 2 seasons at Texas A&M. And Tyler, when I think of Texas A&M, I mean, outside of this year specifically, because they went out and got big transfer portal receivers, I think of just like freak defensive linemen and freak defenders in general. I think of, and granted, this is going to hurt Bengals fans' ears, so please don't listen if you don't need to for this. Give me 30 seconds. Guys like Shamar Stewart, who might not be doing it at the next level, but were causing all kinds of havoc last year for that Texas A&M defensive line. I mean, these are guys that he's helped recruit, he's helped bring in to Texas A&M and helped him develop, at least in his time there. And you want to talk about a complete 180 from Brad White to Jay Bateman. These defenses, dude, I don't even know. I don't know what I'm going to be watching for the first couple of weeks. I'm going to have to readjust my brain and readjust my mindset, because some of the things that he does best, like in 2025, they led the nation in sack percentage. We didn't get after the passer. We didn't blitz. Like, this is known. And you know what else they did, Tyler? They got off the field on 3rd down. They were 3rd in the nation in 3rd down percentage. I mean, this is crazy. We're not going to be playing, soft zone on 3rd down, letting them get 18 on 3rd and 15. This is crazy. There are some murmurs to this hire as well. Mike Elko's a defensive mind. How much is he looking over this defense? What are your thoughts on the Jay Bateman hire?
Yeah, first of all, you're talking about his age, but at one point, I don't know if you knew this, he was actually the youngest Division I football coach At age 26, he was the head coach of what was it, Siena College. So it's no longer a football program. He ran it into the ground, albeit I think he went 5 for 35. But in Siena College, what do you want from him? So, but he was at 26 years old. This guy was a head coach. So fast forward, he's the old man in the room as defensive coordinator. But to your point, I think this is just it kind of shows face here that this college program here, it's doing complete 180. You went from a old school run the rock, play conservative defense, bend but don't break, to now more of an aggressive style, disguise like defense. You're going to get all kinds of pressure. I mean, his philosophy here is, how do I get the one-on-one matchups? Whereas Mark Stoops was like, hey, we're just going to rush 4 and we're going to put everybody else back in coverage. That's what it seemed like it was for the last few years. It was just very, I don't want to say bland, because it was still a good defense. Like, you still put up good stats. Maybe not last year, but the year prior, you were doing pretty good on defense overall. But for the most part, it just seemed like it was pretty traditional, and you just had really good players. In this case, like, you're running a 4-2-5 or 3-3-5 style defense. You're going to have a robber style defense, one high safety. You're going to have, I think, of Matt Patricia when he comes to Ohio State's defense. Like, he comes in, he does all these weird shape shifting things, and you don't typically see in college football. And I think that's what they're going to be doing at Kentucky. You're going to see a lot more of that coming from Texas A&M, where they're shifting things around, and they're making it really difficult for forget everyone else, all the non-conference games, but for SEC games, or albeit we only have 2 or 3 non-conference games now. But we're gonna have competitive defenses against SEC competition, which will be really helpful for us, as the season progresses, and as the tenure of Will Stein goes, because now that we're playing better competition more often, we're going to need those top defenses. And I think that kind of goes back to recruiting too. It always falls back to recruiting and transfer portal. Who can we get to put in this defense? But if we can get those right pieces and those one-on-ones get that much tastier, oh boy, I would hate to be playing us in November, December, when the defense has it all figured out and the offense is all banged up, all that stuff. We'll see what happens on Jay Bateman's defense here. It's going to be an exciting time.
Yeah, and I like what you brought up about all the different exotic looks that they can play and throw out there. Now, granted, I don't know how many of that. I didn't really look too much into what he ran at North Carolina versus what he's doing at Texas A&M. So how much of that is from Mike Elko? But at the least, be a sponge off. There's a reason Mike Elko got that Texas A&M job. There's a reason they are in the playoff right now. He's been a sponge of him for 2 years now. All those different exotic looks that they can throw out there. It's something that we've been begging for. Get in different formations, rush passers, just do something else besides rush traditional 4, maybe throw in a linebacker blitz. I mean, that's literally all we've been doing, playing, cover 2, rolling our safeties up high, and just don't beat us deep. Tyler, I got news for you. We got beat deep a lot this year anyways. So that didn't even work. The foolproof plan didn't even work there. But a lot of those exotic looks, I mean, got this Texas A&M defense in 2024, where they were top 3 in the SEC with 16 interceptions and 76 passes defense. I mean, that's insane. Like, those are ridiculous numbers. And the fact that, honestly, 16 interceptions is only 3rd in the SEC, I kind of want to look up in 2024 who was 1st and 2nd, because those are big time numbers. And kind of just want to talk to maybe just more Big Blue Nation about, people are asking why he's leaving. Is he getting pushed out of Texas A&M? Listen to Mike Elko's interview that he had the other day. He's not getting pushed out of Texas A&M. His job was still there for him there. He's just, think about it, Tyler, like Brad White with Mark Stoops. You only have so much room to grow as a defensive coordinator when the head coach is a defensive mind, and he's always going to be overseeing you, doing all of that. With Jay Bateman coming over to Kentucky and Will Stein obviously being an offensive guy, this defense, it's all him. You have all ownership of it. This is your defense. Take it and run with it. And I think that's why you see Jay Bateman taking a leave from a playoff team to Kentucky and Lexington.
Sure, absolutely. And I also look at the competition part of it. Part of it is, you want to build something special when it comes available too. And to your point, this is going to be his defense. So if he's a big part of Kentucky making a big push here next year, the next few years, I mean, that says a lot about Jay Bateman. And this could be the opportunity Jay Bateman needs to get back into head coaching. It's been some time since he's had that opportunity. A lot of the country is looking for these offensive coaches, these young offensive coaches that can be there for the next 10, 15, 25 years. This is Jay Bateman's opportunity, probably his last real chance to make a name for himself, and make something special down in Kentucky. And the foundational pieces, kind of are there. Anybody who played under Mark Stoops at least came from a defensive mind to begin with. So, you're going to have a defensive mindset. You're just going to have to recalibrate, the players who are still there and then the players you bring in. You're going to have to recalibrate their mindset. But I think the players who do stay, they'll be excited because they'll be like, wow, this is something new. I'm actually freed up to rush the passer now.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually, rely on my guys to get to the quarterback. So I'm not doing one-on-one coverage on the back end. But when I do, it's going to be me on an island out there. And I better go make this pick. Like, there's going to be some opportunities here for these guys. I think they're going to be excited. It's no longer going to be this. And to be fair, I think there is advantages to a conservative defense, but I do think that kind of going back to our point earlier, I think the modern defense, and I like the robber style defense where you're playing one man underneath, one high. The guys are out on islands out there. Defensive pass rushers are getting one-on-one opportunities. I do like that style a little bit more, especially when you're trying to actually consider making push it. You're in the SEC. If you're not trying to talk about getting into the playoffs, get out of the SEC. And I just feel like that's where Kentucky's been the last few years that I've been covering. Is they've kind of been comfortable trying to predict getting to like a 8-8 season, or excuse me, a 6-6 season is where we've been comfortable with getting to a bowl game. If you're in the SEC, we have a real opportunity to make a playoff push. You just have to win 10 games and you can probably get in. So I think there's some excitement here for sure with the playoff opportunities and the defense coming together, the offense potentially coming together as well. I think people will be excited. I think the players will be excited. I think fans will be excited as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of that coming together. Should play complementary football. Like, what do we want this Will Stein offense to have? The ball in their hands. Jay Bateman's going to try and get you the ball back in your hands. They're going to be aggressive and try and get you that ball back. And, I mean, that's something I think we're all looking forward to. It feels like over the past couple of years, like that ability to force turnovers just has not been there for this defense. And that's something that Jay Bateman and Texas A&M kind of specialized over the past couple of years. So getting the ball back to Will Stein and Joe Sloan and getting the offense back on the field to feed the studs, Tyler. Because you got to feed the studs. And that's what Will Stein is all about. Let's go ahead and go through some of these assistant coaches. Won't spend too much time on these guys, but as of right now, as of time of recording, there's only one assistant coach that has been retained, and that's Anwar Stewart. And Tyler, I mentioned this throughout the entire season. The best unit that we had was that defensive line. David Gusta, Mike Humphrey-Grace, Sam Green, those guys were tremendous all year long. Anwar Stewart deserves to stay in Lexington. I don't know if you have anything to say about Anwar. He's been at UK since 2020. I think he's one of those guys that deserve to stay.
Yeah, it sounds like, whenever you keep a coach around from one regime to the other, there has to be some commonalities between the mindsets here. So I'm sure that Will Stein's had the same conversation with Stewart here. From an outside looking in perspective, I do get kind of worried that maybe he falls into the old ways of Mark Stoops and tries to overrule Jay Bateman here. Maybe a little bit. I hope not. I hope that everything falls congruently. But that's the only thing I ever worry about. But the fact that they're keeping him around, that means a conversation was had. And like, hey, these are the philosophies we're going to have. And I think if anything, I'm more optimistic that Stewart is going to be on the same page as Jay Bateman. And I think he's going to be excited for some of the changes. And I think he's going to be excited that his guys aren't going to be getting double teamed at the offensive line. They're going to have some help by a blitz on the outside, a corner blitz, a linebacker blitz, a safety blitz, or something that just makes it more fun for these defensive linemen to go get the quarterback and or stop the run at the same time. So I think he's kept around for a reason. Definitely says something when you kept around from one regime to the next.
Yeah, and completely agree with what you just said there. This guy's deserved it. I mean, if you think about what have been the best units over these past Kentucky teams, except for usually it's corner and defensive line. Obviously this year it wasn't the corner and the hands up on that one. JQ, you made me look like a fool. You made me look like a fool, JQ, but I still love you anyway. All right, Tyler. Tony Washington is the next guy recently hired out of Ohio State, of all things. He is their assistant defensive line coach. He's technically not, he's basically just an assistant out there at Ohio State right now. But that Ohio State defense and what they're doing to every team week in, week out, they're fourth in sack percentage and fifth in yards per rush. And those are things that he oversees as being an assistant to the defensive line coach. Adding a guy from Ohio State when how good that defensive line's been, even 3-4 years running now, can't hurt.
No, I totally agree. I mean, if you can get someone from Ohio State's defense right now, first of all, he was under Matt Patricia. He got some NFL knowledge pushed down on him. And if you remember, Matt Patricia played under Bill Belichick and a few other coaches too. But that's a lot of knowledge that's getting passed down. You can only imagine what he's bringing over to Kentucky. So I'm excited for that. You see some of the players are on the roster right now for Ohio State, and I think a couple of them are projected to go in the high first round there. So. Specifically under Tony Washington himself. So that's really a credit to him. I think he'll be a really good addition there. Curious to know what kind of coach he is. I don't know if that means there's an opportunity for him to progress through the ranks here, or if he's just going to be a lifer position coach. But either way, I think it's a huge win for Kentucky to get someone like Tony Washington, on the roster.
Yeah, and I like what you brought up there. A lot of these guys are young and hungry. Like, this is the start of their coaching career. They aren't just, career position coaches, or at least they don't think that as of now. And we're going to mention that with a lot of these guys. These guys are hungry to succeed and hungry to, get to that next spot, get to that next step in their coaching career. What better spot to do it than Lexington, Kentucky? Like, come on, guys, let's get here. Let's put some boots on the ground and get to going. Because, Tyler, this next guy I'm going to mention, he graduated high school the same year I did. 2017. This guy's 26 years old. Cutter Leftwich. First off, having two Cutters on the team, like, I've never met a single person named Cutter until Cutter Bowley. And having Cutter Leftwich come in and be the offensive line coach. Right now, he's the assistant line / running game coordinator at Oregon. And take as many people from that Oregon offense as you can. I mean, Oregon this season finished 5th in yards per rush and 12th in rushing yards per game. And even when you think about just their ability to protect the passer, finished 27th in quarterback sack percentage. Getting a guy like that who's 26, who's hungry to do more. And Tyler, we're going to bring it up a little bit later. He's got a lot to do. He's got the biggest uphill battle of them all. But I think this is a good hire, getting somebody young, intuitive, somebody that's worked with Will Stein over the past couple of years, already has that camaraderie. And obviously, he's been working with Pat Biondo as well. They kind of know what they're looking for in the portal and in the high school ranks. I think this is one of those you're going to look back in 2 years, Tyler. This is either going to be a home run hire, or this is going to be one where you're like, man, we can't hire 26-year-olds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat with you. I'm kind of thinking the same thing. But look, I mean, the offensive line has been just so brutal to watch. Maybe not as much this year as the year before.
Yeah. Whoa. Slow down. This offensive line was good this year. Give them their credit. The year before was so brutal, and the year before that was very brutal. This year, this offensive line that they brought in was a good unit.
That's fair. But I mean, I'm just talking about like the length of the last regime here. We're just looking at that, and it's like, if you can bring in an offensive coordinator, or excuse me, an offensive line coach that can fix this up, I mean, that's where the football game starts, is on the offensive line, defensive line. If you can bring a coach that can ensure that up, I look at the Patriots with their offensive line. Dante Starkneckia, when he was out for a couple of years, he decided to retire. That was the most brutal life that Tom Brady had during his career. I think they end up losing to Denver in the AFC Championship, get that game. That's when they had DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. And they had no protection. I think they lost the game because Tom Brady didn't have any protection. He had Gronk wide open in the end zone. He just couldn't even find him because he was getting hit so fast. If you get that offensive line fixed up over here in Kentucky and kind of get that same mindset, we saw Cutter already start to progress a little bit. I mean, albeit he was doing it against, easy teams, and he shut down against the tough teams on the road. But, if you get Will Stein and Joe Sloan to develop this guy a little bit more, and then he put an offensive line that he can actually stand behind and actually run these RPOs and, move around a little bit. Hey, watch out. Kentucky football is in business, baby. And then you put that defense back there. Oh, my gosh. Kentucky football might be the next team that these kids are starting to raise up. Instead of going watching Louisville where they had Lamar Jackson, they're going to be looking at Cutter Bowley, and they're going to be like, wow, I can't wait to be a Kentucky fan all the rest of my life. It's going to be exciting for the fans to watch. And that starts with the offensive line. It's going to be an unsung hero that people aren't going to talk about ever. But it could be important for this team in developing and becoming the next best thing in the SEC.
Yeah, and it's going to be very important. And Tyler, we're going to skip past it here for a second, but I want you to remind me of the offensive line's value here a little bit later when we talk about the season going forward. Switching up here, Josh Christian Young, he's going to be the safeties coach. Spent his previous 2 years at the Houston Cougars. And first off, Tyler, I don't know how much of Houston you've been able to watch, but Last year, they had A.J. Halsey, who was one of the better safeties in the country. And I think a lot of that was to do to what Christian Young was able to do. They only allowed 188 passing yards per game. A lot of that is the help of the safeties, and obviously Josh Christian Young led that group. So getting him in here, he's one of the older guys that's going to be on staff. So getting somebody in that is, I don't want to say seasoned. I feel like seasoned sounds mean now. I don't want to get canceled for saying somebody's seasoned. I don't want to call him old or anything. He's a veteran of the college football ranks, and that Houston defense has been good for a little while now. And to get somebody to come from that program, and to think of where a lot of these guys are coming from, Tyler, the state of Texas. You got a lot of guys with ties to the state of Texas. Think of where you want to recruit. You want to recruit the big old state of Texas and bring as many of those guys in from the state of Texas as you can. But having a lot of these guys having so many deep-rooted connections in the state, adding a guy like Josh Christian Young, I think helps a lot too.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important for our secondary, just seeing where our secondary was last year. Finding the right guy that can help bolster that. We need it. I think John Christian Young is in for a real test for himself. I mean, he's going to be playing SEC player type talent. You're going to get these 5-star wide receivers out there, and you got to be ready for it. You're going to get these big tight ends coming through. You got to be ready for it. So it's going to be a real test for John Christian Young compared to where he was with Houston, but it is nice to see him, coming from Houston and being successful down there. I think he had a couple All-Americans playing for him. So, it's really exciting to see. Hopefully we can get All-Americans on our team and, maybe a couple 5-star recruits. I was willing to put them in the secondary. That'd be sweet. Get a couple picks and stuff like that.
From your lips to God's ears, Tyler. But yeah, I mean, first off, we still need to hire a corners coach. We didn't retain our one from last year. We're still looking. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything, so I don't know what to tell you, Big Blue Nation. As of right now of recording, I don't know who the corners coach is, but they've got a lot to work in front of them as well, almost as much as the offensive line does. Tyler, let's keep going down the list. Joe Price here, the wide receivers coach. He's going to take on the receivers coach responsibility. I think this is the guy who's kind of just lucked into what LaDainian Washington started to build last year. If I'm upset about one guy that wasn't retained, it's the fact that LaDainian Washington wasn't retained. I thought he did a tremendous job with these receivers. I think everybody that came in took a step forward outside of maybe Jamori Macklin. I mean, think about the development you saw from guys like Cam Miller, DJ Miller throughout the season this year. You got more run from Hardly Gilmore. You saw Kendrick Law start to get more involved. You saw these guys start to find their groove a little bit later in the season with the full year with LaDainian working with them. I personally wish he would have been retained. He's obviously already found a new job. And when you find a new job that quick, usually that means somebody's made a mistake and letting you go. He's obviously down in Ole Miss now, but it's not hard too much on the past. We got Joe Price here now. He's the associate head coach / passing game coordinator at UTSA currently. And when you think about UTSA and what they've done over the past 4 years since Will Stein first got there, dude, the offense has just been ridiculous for 4 years. I mean, the passing offense is insane. I mean, dude, they average 33 points per game. Sign me up, please. God, Tyler, we're talking about scoring 2 touchdowns in an SEC game for half of the season. Could you imagine if we get to a point where we're scoring like 28 a game? Whew. Oh, sign me up.
Yeah, I just remember, I know boys are going to go my case, but me playing football back in the day, it made a difference. The coaching, our receivers coach, we had one guy, he was a clown ball and he was fun to be around and he just made us better every single day. But I don't know if his X's and O's were all there. And the next year we got this really good guy. He came in and, he was really making sure we were running our routes and learning how to block and all that stuff. Mainly block. We were a D3 school. So, we had to do a lot more of that, less passing. But hey, what it is. But we did a lot better year 2 than we did in year 1. So it really makes a big difference. You look at the receiving core last year, albeit I think it was a very stale offensive game plan. You're talking about, what we're going to be doing this year and what the receivers are going to be needed for. A lot of RPOs. You're going to be thinking a lot as a receiver. You're going to be like, okay, I need to read this defense as much as I know what my route is because if I'm looking at this defense and it's a certain formation that doesn't go well with the RPO, I know I'm probably going to be blocking because that quarterback's probably going to be running. If it matches up perfectly against me, I need to know like, hey, I need to be open for this pass, or whatever the case may be. This offense is going to be so dynamic next year. Having the right receiver coach is going to be really helpful for us. And then also, I know you're talking about the recruiting side from Texas. I don't know if you knew this. His nickname down in Texas is Eastside Joe. That tells me he has the whole east side of Texas, so that's okay with me. I like that.
Hey, the more recruiters we can get, the better, because a lot of this is still built through the high school ranks. I know you want to supplement with the transfer portal, but that's the key word there. You want to supplement. You don't want to build your team through the transfer portal. You still want to get these guys in, lock them in, develop them. I think the old traditional way of still that Mark Stoops brand of getting the guys in and developing them is still there. But you also have to be able to supplement when guys do leave and stuff like that. And I think that's where we fell short in the past. Hopefully, guys like Joe Price will really help this team supplement in the portal and develop future receivers, because I think we got some stars in the making with Hardly Gilmore, Cam Miller, and DJ Miller specifically. I think those guys could do a lot of damage in this offense. And Tyler, it's crazy to say, man. I just want to see a football game. I want to see this offense on the field. We don't even have a roster at this moment. I don't even know if we have enough guys to play currently. Last coach we're going to talk about here, Colby Smith, another U of L guy. Played at U of L. I mean, Tyler, what? Dude, I'm floored. I'm flabbergasted. Keep bringing all these Louisville guys in. But this guy does have a legitimate resume. Spent a couple years with the Dolphins, and then he's been at Arkansas for the past 2 years. In 2024, Arkansas averaged 185 rushing yards per game, which is third in the SEC. And in 2025, they finished fourth in rushing yards per attempt and then 25th in rushing yards per game. Obviously, the running back coach is doing something right. He's obviously doing something right without even diving too much into everything. He finished fourth in yards per rush and 25th in yards per game. I think the running back coach is doing just a little something right.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you want to see Cutter Boley develop as a quarterback, the first thing we got to do is just make sure that running back is or the running game is in there and it's doing well. Albeit we had Seth McGowan last year, and I thought there was times where he did really well. Dante Dowdell, there was games where he did okay. I know he was your favorite running back, Cam, and I wish we could get him back and play another 5 years, but
we'll be here next year, so we'll see
perfect.
some development from him, hopefully.
But having the right guy in place, that really sets the tone for the development of the quarterback. It really sets the tone for the offense, and it helps the defense out. When you have a good running game, it keeps the offense off the field. I know that's kind of the Mark Stoops philosophy in a way. I'm not trying to do that necessarily, but that's just fundamental football when you're looking at it, especially in the college field. I mean, even Mendoza up there in Indiana, I just felt like they were running the ball pretty well too, or at least complimentary enough against Ohio State to at least get the ball down the field. So, you have to have that running game going. I think that opens up so much, especially in the RPO style spread option offensive play scheme that you're probably going to be getting next year.
Yeah, and make no mistake about it. I think people think of Oregon and they think of like throwing the ball around the yard, which they do a lot of. Because guess what? They're just a high-powered offense. They still ran the ball 56% of their plays last year. Like they were still a run-first team. I still think that's what Will Stein's going to look forward to doing. And hopefully guys like Dante can take that next step, Jason Patterson as well. And hopefully you look to supplement that running back room in the transfer portal, because Mizzou's going to be losing Marquise Davis, who was a Kentucky commit that we lost on signing day last year. I don't know if they have any connections to him or if that was just a pass regime. But there's going to be a lot of transfer portal running backs that hit. Hopefully there's one that Colby Smith and Will Stein and Joe Sloan like and think can fit this team. All right, Tyler. So we just spent all that time talking about the coaching staff. 58 minutes to be exact talking about this coaching staff. Who are they going to coach? Who? Let's go ahead and talk about things like that, obviously, because that's the most important part. Stein talks about feeding the studs. We've got to go out and get some studs, because right now we've got to fill in for 31 different spots on this roster between seniors and guys who have already decided to enter the transfer portal. So far, only got 4 guys that have decided to put their name in the portal. Steven Souls, Stone Saunders, Preston Bowman, and Landon Watson. Steven Souls, great situational pass rusher. I'm not sure if he was ever going to develop into more than that. Would love to have seen him stick around. Outside of that, all the other guys, I'm really not sure that I think that was just a genuine shake of the hand between Sloan, and it was just a, hey, thanks for what you've done here. We're going to look elsewhere. And Tyler, 27 seniors are leaving this roster this year. I'm going to rattle through them real quick. Tyler, there's going to be some of these names on here that I know for a fact you haven't heard. Because there was a couple of them that I looked at and I was like, I don't know who this guy is either. But let's go ahead and run through that list real quick. Troy Stellato, Kendrick Law, Cam Old, Seth McGowan, Alex Safari, J.J. Hester, Zach Calzada, J.Q. Hardaway, David Rayner, Jamori Macklin, Jansen Dunn, Bo Allen, Fred Ferrier, Jordan Lovett, Jackson Schultz, Josh Terrell, Aiden LaRosse, David Gusta, Jagger Burton, Shiaz Pete, Josh Braun, Jack Monday, Cole Lanter, Khalil Saunders, Wilson Berry, Josiah Hayes, and Alex Wolschlager. Tyler, that's 4 of your 5 starting offensive line right there. And I texted you earlier. It ruined my day. I'm scrolling through Instagram. Jalen Farmer posted something. What do you think? Jalen Farmer, our star guard, a guy who you thought you could pencil in to take that next step. And I genuinely thought at the least next year, if he comes back, he's going to be a day 2 draft pick. He decides to declare for the draft this year. And now you are looking at Cutter Leftwich and you're saying, sorry, bud, we've got nothing at the offensive line. You're going to have to build 5 new guys.
Yeah, first of all, I'm always excited to see someone go chase their dream and go to the NFL. That's a really cool, it's a really cool opportunity. I can't say that if I was in the same situation and I had an opportunity to play, if I would stay an extra year or if I'd go. I've never been in that situation, but I knew my dream was always to make it to the NFL and play in the NFL. So, I can only say this. Good luck, Jalen. That's a really cool opportunity for you. Good luck. I hope the best for you. I hope you get drafted. I hope you have a good long career. What a blow. I mean, that we're talking about it, but also kind of going back down the list you were just mentioning with all these seniors, 2 thoughts that come to mind. One, we had all these seniors on the roster, and it just didn't seem like we could make it work out. Like you would think you have all these seniors, and you're like, oh wow, like we should make a good run. Like that should be a good roster when you have a lot of old guys on the team. The second thought is, yeah, but this is kind of the turnover year. This is the kind of the year where you bring in a new regime, you bring in a new GM, you bring in a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, new defense. I mean, everybody's brand new. They're going to have a lot of different philosophies. You're going to have to clean the toxicity out, clean the old mindsets out. And some of that, you try to say recalibrate as much as you want. I think that's become the new term over the last 3 to 4 years, is recalibrate your team. It's a rebuild. You rebuild your team. You rebuild your philosophy. You rebuild it with guys that you bring in and say, hey, like this is what we want to do. And if you don't fit that to a T, then we move on. Granted, like most of these guys are moving on because they're seniors, but I mean, this is the opportunity where Coach Stein and our GM and all of them they can actually make their headlines now and go find players that will fit their system and develop around that. Yeah. I think Pete. Pat was actually talking about that in an interview or in an article, I think somewhere I was reading into, but they were talking about building mindsets like that too.
Yeah, and you mentioned like how many seniors that are on this roster or was on this roster and how you'd expect them to be a little bit better. A lot of these guys were just transfer portal mercenaries going from school to school. I'm looking at the list now, and there's 10 guys who were in this system for more than a year. So that means 17 of these guys were just in here for their final season. And honestly, some of them really worked out. Like Kendrick Law had a good year. Seth McGowan had a really good year. J.J. Hester, showed up in flashes. Was it his fault? Was it the offensive play calling? We'll never know. David Rayner, I think, had a really good year coming in. Obviously, we mentioned the offensive line and the guys that they brought in there. But you whiffed on a lot of them, too. Just in general, like Troy Stellato, Tyler. Dude, what did he play? 4 snaps all season? This is the guy you got from Clemson. You thought he was going to be like your plug-and-play slot receiver. Cam Old's a defensive end that you got. You thought he was going to play a lot more than he did. He didn't get on the field too much. And then, obviously, the biggest miss of them all, Zach Calzada. You've pledged a lot of money to that. It didn't work out. Yeah, get your money right, Garrett. Garrett, get your money up. It's just something you got to be better at. And obviously, we mentioned, I think, having the GM and the assistant GM, hopefully, we're a lot better in this transfer portal cycle. Because while you did have a lot of good hits in there, you had about double as many misses.
Yeah, you talk about, we talk about in business, the efficiency and stuff, when being efficient with your work. And I think having two GMs come in, or GM and assistant GM come in, I think you're going to be more efficient with where your dollars are going. And, it's going to, I think it'll start to show up. It's one thing to have some old guys in the room, and I'm never going to be upset that we have too many seniors on the field, but sometimes you want to build young too and keep these guys around for a few years. You look at Ohio State, and they're able to keep a receiving room together for for about 2 or 3 years before they can finally go to the NFL. Talk about Jeremiah Smith and Marvin Harrison Jr. and if we can get some of those guys, I'm not just talking about receivers, but any position, we get some guys that stick around a program for a few years. I think that'll be huge for the program development. And then not spend so much money on the NIL from the transfer portal. Let's call a spade a spade. The guys who you want from the transfer portal, it's a bidding war to get them. It's not, you don't just go out and say, hey, like, you guys want to play for the University of Kentucky? It's an SEC team. They're also getting calls from LSU and Florida and all these other big programs, Penn State, Ohio State. Like, they're getting calls from all these schools that can pay them the same NIL money, if not more. So, let's be wiser with how we spend our money. I think having people that can actually review film and find out, what they're systematically how they fit in. Uh, you know, Will Stein, I think will have some control over that too. But spending our money wisely, I think that'll make our team better and actually make us more competitive as an SEC team moving forward. Which, if you're a Big Blue Nation, you should be excited for. I think you definitely should be more excited for this team moving forward. Maybe maybe it doesn't show up necessarily full fledged year one, but year two, year three, year four, when we've had a full season to go recruiting and transfer portals and all that stuff. Our coaches aren't in a playoff for another team right now, wasting. I don't want to say wasting time. They're using their time effectively, but being more effective toward the University of Kentucky. I think that'll be it'd be a huge step forward for the university and the program, and I think fans should be excited for that.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned the allocation of funds. Honestly, you're going to kind of have to do it like you did last year. You're going to need 5 transfer starters at the offensive line. That's going to eat up a good amount of your budget. Unfortunately, we just have not fixed the high school recruiting when it comes to offensive line. I think a big part of that budget is going to have to go to that offensive line. And then outside of that, man, I think the cornerback room you've really got to fix. I think you have DJ Waller, who, I mean, I think he actually played in 4 games. When he's healthy, he's terrific, but how often is he on the field? There's a lot of this staff's got a lot to do, man. They really do. This is why, selfishly I said Will, you can win 1 game in the playoffs. Outside of that, man, I need you back home in Lexington because we've got a lot to do, and getting this offensive line figured out in that secondary, I think is going to be priority 1 and 2 for this roster.
When I look at the University of Kentucky as a job opening in the SEC, even other schools around the nation, it's one of those jobs that is probably one of the bigger challenges, but has one of the bigger upsides as well, because it's still an SEC team, and you still have cash to use when everything starts forming together. You're kind of scraping I don't want to say bottom of the barrel, but like you're starting over from scratch in a way. You're just going to have to spend a little bit more upfront to fix it early on, but then you still have a lot of opportunity to build your team for the future. Will Stein and Pat coming over from Oregon, that really does benefit them because they already know how to build a good program. I think that's really going to benefit Kentucky for the future. But this is an opportunity where, because they have all these graduating seniors, there's going to be a lot of openings, which means there's going to be a lot of players that they need to go find recruiting and develop them and say, hey, like, you might not play year one, so we're going to have to go pay all these guys some NIL so we can have a competitive team. But look, you develop into the player we want, you're gold for the next 2 to 3 years. And I think as recently as not this past season, but the season before, you look at Texas's offensive line, for example, they were all recruited at the same time and they all raised at the same time. I think they played 3 years. They're all 2 or 3 year starters together. That was an incredible offensive line. Granted, like, they all graduated, so you had to replace them all. But at the same time, like, you can start doing that at Kentucky University just as well as you can do it at Texas. You're still an SEC team, and like we talked about earlier, you're still in a very favorable region where you're still in the SEC, but you're just in the same region. You're still in that Midwest region where you're only competing against Ohio State, really.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to comment on that. But Tyler, when we're looking at just roster building in general, the funds are there. They spent a lot of money on this team last year. Everything that Will Stein needs to have to succeed is in place. There are no more of those excuses. The NIL money's not there. We don't have a GM. I'm spread thin here. I'm spread thin there. No, you've picked this entire staff. These are people that you've worked with before. You've worked with at different stops. People that come by recommendation from whatever. You have a general manager. You have an assistant general manager. There are no excuses. The only excuses I'll give you is the fact that you got to play a 9-game SEC schedule. And I'm not going to be too hard on you year one as long as we see some things, but you also have to remember there's some programs that are out there doing it right now that are just flipping the entire narrative. I'm not going to compare them to doing what Kurt Cignetti's done because obviously what he's done is ridiculous and crazy. But can you do something of what Clark Lee's done at Vanderbilt? Yes. Like, can you do there? The blueprint has been laid for teams that are not traditional powerhouses in big conferences to be able to get to that next level. And hopefully, actually, I don't know if I want to say hopefully for Clark Lee and hopefully for Kurt Cignetti, but hopefully for Kentucky, they can sustain success like that going forward. It all starts with a year one because I don't think, I mean, you mentioned it's kind of a building year. I don't look at it like that necessarily because you still got to go out there and win football games. But this is a year where there really are no expectations because you came in a day before signing day. You're losing 27 seniors. You have to build a whole new offensive line, a whole staff from scratch. He's going to get a lot of grace this year. But year two, I don't think that grace is – I think that grace will start to wear – not that it'll wear thin because I think Big Blue Nation is behind him 110%. But I think with what Kurt Cignetti has done at Indiana, it really has reset the traditional mindset of college football fans in saying you need this much time to develop a program and take it to that next level. Because if you can do it at the worst program of all time in college football in Indiana in 2 years, you can do it at Kentucky, you can do it at Vanderbilt, you can do it at Mississippi State, fill in the school there. That's kind of just my soapbox I wanted to get on before we hopped off the pod.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, Cam, because you're a lifelong fan here, and you're more in tune with how the fans currently feel, how they felt over the last 10, 15 years. What is obviously a perfect season next year would be awesome, but very unlikely. What's a successful season look like next year, and what would be like the bare minimum that as a Kentucky fan you would accept? Because 3-0 or 3-9, for example, okay, you win your 3 non-conference games, but then you lose all the SEC teams. I feel like that's still unacceptable. I almost feel like, at least from my perspective, 5 to 6 wins is right where you should be at to be like a normal, like what I expect for the season to end with. I would say like 4 to 5 wins on the low end next year. Like you should at least get 1 or 2 SEC wins minimum, and that's just because of the roster rebuild that you're going to have to do, over this offseason and into next year. That's at least my personal take. But from Kentucky fan base here, you've been a lifelong fan. I kind of want to hear like what are your expectations for what you're expecting just in year one? Given all the changes and stuff that you're bringing in.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have to give me until like January 14th when the transfer portal's done and I can see what this roster looks like and what they're planning to do. But just like baseline, the only bad thing is you can't even say like a guaranteed, like you only have 3 out of conference games now. And obviously one of those is Louisville, who's taking you to the woodshed in back-to-back years. So obviously Youngstown State and South Alabama that you play, you're guaranteeing 2 wins there. But outside of this, I mean, let's just listen to the schedule. Alabama in the playoff, Texas A&M in the playoff. You got South Carolina, who had a really down year. Theoretically, that should be your 3rd win of the season. LSU, who's hiring Lane Kiffin, and they're going to dump so much money into that program, he's going to have anything and everything he needs. You got to face them. Oklahoma in the playoff. Vanderbilt just missed the playoffs. Tennessee, you can never beat Tennessee for whatever reason. Florida just hires John Sumrall, and they're going to put a bunch of money into that program as well. Missouri had a terrific year, and Eli Drinkwitz is one of the better coaches in the SEC, and then you finish against Louisville. Dude, he's got an uphill climb. That's why I say I give him a lot of grace. But then again, man, I get that Cignetti's in the Big Ten. It's a little easier. But I don't know. I find myself on both sides, man. I really do. Get me until mid-January. We can see what a little bit of this roster starts to look like in then maybe, just maybe, I'll give you a schedule predictions. But as of right now, man, you look at what we have on roster. I think you're saying like 4 or 5 wins is probably where you're at.
Listen, I just want to make sure that we're clear come this time next year, or actually about, let's say, like November next year, when this team is sitting at 3-3. I just want you to remember what we were saying right now, because you're
Oh,
giving a
I
lot of
won't.
grace ahead of
I
time.
won't.
But because then you're going to be like, this team stinks. Like, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about, oh my God. And we got to talk about Boyers, calm him down too, because he's going to be flying off the walls. And, you know, but
It's also a lot
just
of this
remember
is
that.
about how they all look too. Obviously, like if you lose these games, but it's close, and you're losing games, not necessarily how you want to lose games, but if the offense looks really good and you're finding ways to the defense is starting to, if you're turning a corner and everything looks like it's trending up, you're just didn't have the roster year one. Because I think you can clearly see a difference of when you're just out athleted versus when you're out coached. As long as I don't go into a lot of these games and look at it and I'm just like, oh man, we were just thoroughly out coached. But you look at a lot of these games, dude, and you're going against Mike Elko, Kalen DeBoer, Lane Kiffin, John Summerall. I mean, Clark Lee, dude. I mean, this schedule is it's insane. It really is. And Will Stein, I'm behind you. Whatever you need from the Cats Talk podcast, we're here. I don't know what you would need from us. I really don't. But if you need something, Tyler and Cam have got you covered. Tyler, do you have anything you want to tell Big Blue Nation before we sign off here? We've already taken an hour and 15 minutes of their time.
No, I think, I would just say this, and I said it earlier, but I really mean it. I think if you're a Kentucky fan right now, you should be really truly excited. Like, this is an exciting time for Kentucky.
Yeah, but you brought up the schedule on me to make me get negative before we ended. I just went.
Was
through
that
an
me that
hour.
got negative? Was that me that got negative? I don't think so. I don't think so.
I went through an hour of positivity and so much positive vibes talking about this is going to work, this is going to work, and then you want to bring up the 2026 schedule. Tyler, we don't even have a roster set. How do you want me to schedule predictions here, pal?
Buddy, I'm doing the same thing as you. I'm thinking optimistically, like, okay, assuming the transfer portal goes, okay, like bland. I'm not talking about like they sign everybody, they don't sign nobody. They sign, right where they need to be. I think they can win 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, well, if we're doing everything optimistically, 12-0, and we're in the playoff. So there. If you want me to be optimistic,
I said realistically. I don't want optimistic. I'm realistically.
Who knows? Maybe that is realistic.
All right, hang on.
I don't know.
We're gonna base the season off of this. Can we beat Louisville or not?
That's a great question. I got to see the roster.
All right. Well, Big Blue Nation, you heard it first. We're going to regroup in January to talk about this because Cameron Johnston can't make up his mind. Hypothetical. What's a realistic
There's
win?
There's 30 guys on the roster. What do you want me to do here? All right, Big Blue Nation. Before I jump through the screen and kill our co-host here, I'm going to sign off of here. Big Blue Nation. Tyler and I are actually heading down to watch Mark Pope and this Kentucky Wildcats team face off against Rick Pitino and the St. John's Johnnies, Tyler. First off, that's going to be a tremendous experience. We'll obviously have a lot of content for you guys there. So keep in tune with the Cats Talk podcast on TikTok, on Instagram, on X, and wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. We're anywhere and everywhere. Tyler, go Big Blue. Any breaking news, we'll have it for you. Go Cats.
Go Cats.